Well, welcome back to the Azure Podcast. This is episode number 433, being recorded on the 4th of August, 2022. I'm here with Evan, and we're going to talk about another service that doesn't get a whole lot of coverage today. But before we get there, I think Evan has some news that he'd like to talk about. News, Evan?
Sure. Yeah, a couple of things. So one, if you use Windows, Windows requires activation for full functionality. By the way, I do want to dispel a myth. You don't have to activate it for it to run. There's just, we're going to put nasty grams, and if we audit you know, we'll make you pay money at that point. But everything works. So I hear people all the time worried about that. But we're changing the KMS DNS servers in Azure. There's some new IP addresses that are published. So for customers that are, that block a lot of traffic and they explicitly allow this, they're going to need to update the IPs. I think the old ones will stay on for like 6 or 8 months. So it's not you should get ready for it and you should go make your changes, but obviously nothing's going to break tomorrow. The other thing is Azure Firewall Premium is now, and I had to go look this up, but it's ICSA Labs certified for intrusion protection. And this actually makes the Azure Firewall Premium service the only firewall that is, the only firewall that is both firewall, so sort of standard traffic, and intrusion protection certified, right? And this, for anybody that wasn't aware of this certification, I had to go take a look at it myself because I wasn't familiar with it. They basically put real traffic through these things, sort of a mix of some real and some standard tests and making sure everything gets blocked that should get blocked, and make sure it doesn't block things that they don't expect. So it's a test bed for these firewalls, but it's great because it really says a third party says that yes, the firewall does the things you expect it to do, right? Which is super, super concerning, right? We all want to make sure that our firewalls block what we want them to block. And then the last thing, and you should take note of this, nobody ever gives away anything for free, but we are changing our IPv6 addresses from a paid offering to a free offering. Right. This is really, I suspect, this is just me reading between the lines, but IPv6, there's a lot more of them. And we really, as an industry, we really want people to start moving to that. So I think this is our, sort of olive branch in that direction of hoping to get people to move.
That's good. Yeah, it's nice to see something coming free for a change.
But
now
I have to learn how to
encourage people to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sujit.
I was going to say it's probably they're hoping to encourage people to use the IPv6 as well, right?
Yeah. I don't even. I mean, the number of IPv6 addresses out there is, I don't know, some really, really big number. Functionally infinite versus IPv4 we ran out of several years ago. Like they're all mapped. Everybody,
right.
That's and the only downside is I'm gonna have to learn how to say IPv6 addresses. Those are.
How many is
those
it?
Are
like
tough.
16 octets, or what is
it's
it?
like 60. It's like, I don't know. I think it's like 8 octets or something like that. And there's rules for like how you can describe some of it when you shorten it and stuff. And I don't know. I just haven't stuffed that in my brain. I guess stuff like this means I'm going to have to at some point.
By the way, I like the look with the glasses. It looks nice.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing out that the universe has decided I'm officially old. And I do need reading glasses right now. My wife is super happy about that fact because she picked them up a couple of years ago. And now I have to wear them. Yes. Yeah. Thanks to G. What are friends for?
That's right. It looks good on you. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah. So maybe we'll get started on our topic for today, then, which is the Azure Relay Service. And I don't think, I got to say, not many people have heard of this service, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something that sounds conflicting, two statements. One is what we just said is it's a service that probably not many people have heard of. It's not very, I don't know how much it's used, but it's certainly not as well known as any other service that we have in Azure.
Yeah.
But the conflicting statement is that, believe it or not, this is one of the first services I used in Azure about 8 years ago.
I say that means it's been around for a while.
It's exactly the point I wanted to make. Thank you. Is that I'm glad that Microsoft has kept this service in Azure and has seen the importance of it So it used to be called a service bus relay. Okay, so folks may
Oh, I
remember
do
it from
remember that.
that name,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's ringing a bell, right? And now they've renamed it to, I don't know when they, it's not recently, but it's been renamed to Azure Relay Service. Okay,
Okay.
just on its own. But there's a lot that it does share with Service Bus, and in fact, if you look up the pricing of the Service Bus Azure Relay service, it's kind of associated a little bit with Service Bus pricing. You're not paying anywhere as much as what you would pay for Service Bus pricing, and we can talk about that later. But it kind of, I like to think of it as in being part of the Service Bus family, right?
Okay.
That's how you think about the relay service. And why is that? Why would it be part of that same family? If you just take a step back and say, what does Service Bus do for you? It allows two parties. If you're writing an app and I'm writing an app, we can talk to each other using Service Bus, correct? You put messages on the queue, I pull them off the queue on my end. I don't need to know where you are. You don't need to know where I am, right?
And it layers in it becomes asynchronous at that point as well, right? So I just sort of throw it over the wall to you. You get it whenever you're around. Okay.
And that's adds a layer on top called brokered messaging, right?
Yeah.
So there's a broker on top, which is what you just described, where I don't have to be around when you send me the message. You just put it over there. I pick it up whenever I come up, right?
Okay.
So Service Bus lets both of us communicate with each other using this common point or a meeting place. The term that they use is the rendezvous point, right? So we meet at the rendezvous point, which is the Service Bus namespace itself that you create, and then you send and receive messages through that rendezvous point, right? So that's the nice thing about Service Bus. Now, Azure Relay Service kind of gives you the same kind of feature, but you don't have the rendezvous. Let's say we take away the rendezvous, the fact that take away the brokered component. Okay. You still need a place where two applications can meet in the cloud, right? You want to talk to me, I want to talk to you, but we don't have to know where each other is. We can still use the same concept of a namespace or a meeting place in the cloud. However, both of us have to be on at the same time, right? So I have
so
to
it
be
becomes
alive.
synchronous.
So
at that
now it
point.
becomes synchronous, exactly,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So think of a synchronous connection rendezvous in the cloud between two applications is the best way to describe the Azure Relay Service, right? And that's also why it's somewhat connected to Service Bus, because it's the same paradigm, except it's, as you said, it's asynchronous. One is asynchronous and the other one is synchronous. Okay.
So I'm sort of trying to get this in my head. So would an analogy be, email would be Service Bus, right? So I
Correct.
send an email and you get it later and you read it later, and the system just sort of makes sure I just send it. I don't know how it gets there, whatever.
Right.
And then chat would be closer to the relay service, where you and I mean, I guess, yeah, there is offline chat, but conceptually the point of chat is that you and I are talking sort of real time, and it doesn't do me a whole lot of good to post a question if you're not there to answer it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's one way to think about it. Now, why do people use it? Right? What's the reason why you would want something like this? So the original reason why the Service Bus Relay was created is to allow companies to host applications on site without having to open up any firewall. One of the beauty of this model is that they only have to do an outbound connection to Azure. So let's suppose they are having an application in their data center, right? And they want to expose it, but they, as with any company, the moment you say, "Oh, punch a hole through the firewall,"
it goes back to that firewall conversation we were having.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody is like, running around in a circle, wondering what to do.
Yeah.
So the easiest thing is say, hey, don't open up the firewall, right? Just allow an outbound connection, which most I think companies don't have a problem with that, right? Allowing outbound traffic. So you establish this outbound connection from your application running on premises to this meeting place in the cloud, the rendezvous point, right? And that's established and it's fixed there. Now, if another application wants to talk to your application, they have to just talk to that meeting place in the cloud, right? Into the rendezvous point. They don't need to know where you are, that you're behind a firewall. That doesn't matter. They're just connecting to that endpoint, which is in the cloud, as if it's you, right? It almost seems like it's your application sitting in the cloud, but it's not really sitting in the cloud, right? And so they'll just talk to it using the normal protocols. We can talk about some of the various protocols that are available, but let's just think the simple HTTP protocol. They can establish a simple HTTP connection there, send some authorization information, and they're connected to you, right? And but your application is actually sitting in the data center. Once the connection is established, you can go back and forth, exchange traffic just like you would any other web application paradigm, for example.
So this sounds like, and I don't, I'm just sort of theorizing because I don't know for sure, but like if you think about the way Power BI has its, I think they call it their on-premises connector or something like that. You know, there've been variants of that over the years. I think SQL Server had one at some point. That's got to be, that's conceptually, it's sort of that same leverage mechanism where that's being the interface back to the service that I don't even know where it is, but I'm doing an outbound connection at that point. I'm not allowing Power BI to come talk to my, you know, my SQL Server on premises directly. It's going through this relay, but really the relay is going out, making that, you know, sort of passing the information back and forth
Exactly
as necessary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, you know, if you're going to host, like I believe, like a lot of our internal services are using this Azure Relay to expose services out to the internet, primarily because, you know, many of them started way back when we used to have our own data center, right? And then eventually now we're in Azure, but they're still hosting it in Azure, but still using that same paradigm, not having to worry about this problem. So, you know, if you expose the applications that way, right, the question is, you know, how many instances can you keep on site? So currently you're allowed to have, I think, up to 25 instances of your application running on premise, right? So if you have a farm of servers on site that is hosting your service, you can have up to 25 of them connected to the same rendezvous point, the same relay in the cloud. And you can have up to 5,000 connections coming into that endpoint. So that's currently the some of the numbers that we have to deal with when we talk about this. Now, the interesting thing is, you know, how does this system work, right? What's the kind of connection protocol that makes it all work? So there is the concept of a gateway in this setup over here.
That's what they used to call it, Power BI. I was trying to think of the name.
Yes. So in fact, all of these things, services that you mentioned, they call them hybrid connections typically, right? And in fact, that is also what it is known as in Azure Relay Service. You create a hybrid connection. So the hybrid connection is that point in the cloud that everybody is connecting to. Okay. Now, when you create this hybrid connection out there, what happens? It goes. You connect to the nearest gateway in Azure, right? It'll connect you to the nearest gateway that's closest to you. That gateway will register you inside something called the gateway store, which is a database that knows where everybody is, right? Now, if I am connecting somewhere else to another gateway and I say I want to talk to Evan's application, which is registered here, right? I'll look up and it'll look me up in the gateway store and say, hey, Evan's over here. So why don't you talk to him directly here, right? Into this gateway.
Gotcha.
This way, because they want you know, if I'm going to talk to you, there's no point us going, you know, taking a round circuitous route. We should be talking to each other very quickly through the same gateway if possible. And so this way you get redirected. I get redirected temporarily to this gateway here so that we can have a quick conversation with a minimum latency through this local gateway right here. So that's kind of roughly how the thing works. And now you have, when it comes to authentication, you have a couple of options. You can make this hybrid connection unauthenticated if you want to, which would mean anybody could connect in there, and then you deal with the authentication in another way. Or you can require authentication. Authentication can be done using standard connection strings, right, just like we do with Service Bus today. You know, you create all the shared access policies, and you can
like an access token and whatnot.
Exactly.
That's in the connection string. Okay.
So you can do it that way. But another way you can do this is by simply using AAD, right?
Okay.
So just standard AAD authorization. You get a token, the usual libraries you can use to authorize with AAD, and then you connect using, the OAuth mechanism.
Does that mean that if I'm using AD in that mechanism, am I limited to connecting as a user, or can I use service principals, anything else that can get a token functionally?
Yeah, anything. You can use service principals as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
So my
also
app can do it. I don't have to do it as a user. Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So that answers this kind of security question. So then it comes to how do I build these kind of apps, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're building apps for this. So you could build. Today we support .NET, Java, and Node.js. Those are the three kind of frameworks that we support for building relay style applications. I'll take .NET because that's the easiest one and the one that I'm most familiar with. In fact, the easiest way to host an ASP.NET Core application that connects to their Azure Relay service takes one line of code that you have to put in your app. It just says use
It's pretty
Azure
simple.
Relay. You say
Yeah.
use Azure Relay, give it the connection string, and you can run I can run it on my computer. I can run my ASP.NET app right here, and anybody in the world can access it, right? Just through the relay endpoint. That's how cool it is.
Mhm.
So that's the easiest way. Similarly, you could build things like reverse proxies, right? You've heard the term reverse proxies.
Mhm.
So let's say I have a website running internally and I want to expose that website to the world, but I don't want to do this thing. You can write a simple reverse proxy and say, hey, yeah, this little old legacy website that I have here on site, anybody in the world can access it through the hybrid connection through the rendezvous point, and as long as they're authenticated and whatnot, they can get to it. So that's another common scenario for using the Azure Relay, right? So one is just hosting an ASP.NET Core, the other one is writing a small application that serves as a reverse proxy into some other website that you have internally, and then the third is just the most simplest is just having a simple HTTP connection on both sides, right? Again, the client, the person who's connecting to you, doesn't have to know anything about the relay. It thinks it's connecting to a normal website, web service, right? So
The
whatever.
URL is going to be different, or can I still put this behind like a DNS, evanscool API.com or something like that? Do I need to know the relay address to
You
point
need
it
to
there?
know, you have to use the relay address that's part of the connection string. So this is very similar to how we do
Okay.
service bus. So it's
Yeah. Okay.
typically your namespace dot, window, whatever, I forget what it
Okay.
is,
So at the end of the
windows.net.
day, it is a URI. It's just going to be sort of the defined
Yeah,
one for
it's
service bus rather than anything I
yeah,
create.
it
Okay.
actually even starts with SB:// the
Yeah.
usual namespace URL.
Okay.
So yeah, you still have to use that on both sides, but you kind of talk to it, right? Now this again, I'm talking about from your internal application registering.
Mhm.
Okay, from the outside coming in, you can talk to it as a normal HTTP connection. So there you don't need to know the service bus because it's exposed as a normal HTTP endpoint to the world.
Got you.
Internally, you're
Okay.
connecting to it
Yeah.
as if it's a special service bus connection. There's a hybrid connection you're establishing. But externally, it's like, oh, here's my HTTP endpoint, right? And the
Mhm.
URL is exactly the same. I think that's probably what you're asking. Can you
Yeah.
mask?
Yeah.
And you probably can just using the
Okay.
normal DNS aliasing, whatever, C
Okay.
record or something of that nature. I'm sure you could do that. I haven't tried it.
Okay.
But yeah, you can connect to that using HTTPS, and away you go.
What about protocols? We sort of mentioned that earlier. I mean, HTTP is I mean, these days almost everything talks it. Even some apps that don't really know HTTP, we wrap it inside of HTTP these days. But can I do, TCP? Can I do UDP? Can I do, TDS, which is SQL Server? Like, what capabilities from a protocol perspective?
So you could do WebSockets out of the
Okay.
box. The programmatic support is for WebSockets and HTTP, right?
Okay.
There's also a third one which is older. I don't know if you remember this. Used to be called WCF Relay. right? And so if you do use
Single
Windows
WC,
Communication Framework, which
Yeah.
I'm sure there are folks out there that use it,
I'm sure.
you can. There's a whole separate setup for WCB. In fact, that was the original incarnation
Okay.
of the relay service. It only supported WCB back in the day when I first started using it. That's how I started using it. It evolved into something that's much more modern now, supporting WebSockets and HTTP as well.
Okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
but
So
to answer your
really,
question,
yeah. So I think, but basically what you're saying is anything that can talk HTTP is probably the mainline scenario for this. Which again, these days, almost everything, right, is really using HTTP. I mean, that's
if you're not
that's
using
just
it directly, you can
yeah,
tunnel it on
yeah,
HTTP or tunnel it on
yeah,
WebSockets or something like that, right?
yep,
There's always ways to do it. So yeah, so
yep.
technically you could expose even a SQL server inside, outside, if you wanted to, by making sure that it was wrapped correctly, tunneled correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wanted to cover one last thing, and we do have a lot of services in Azure that are off the style gateway, right? I just wanted to clarify. I've added one more to that mix over here by talking about Azure Relay Service. Of course, we talked about Service Bus, which is another form, but then in the traditional networking sense, we have things like App Gateway, right? So that's way where you can allow incoming traffic into your network. That's a more modern
It's a
way of doing
proxy,
it.
basically, at that
It's
point.
it's a layer 7 proxy coming
Yeah.
in, right? Then we have something called NAT gateway, which is essentially allows you to all your internal resources to share a common IP address on the internet, right? Like you said, you want to preserve your public IP addresses, so you can have one public IP address connected to your NAT gateway, and all your VNets can be funneled through that egress channel. Then there's also something called the local network gateway, which is used primarily to connect and over express route to connect your on-premises network
for
with
hybrid
with a
TCP
VNet in Azure, right? So, and then the biggest of all is, of course, API gateway, right? An API management, sorry, which is the biggest, most complex form of incoming routing, where you can offer all features, like you can modify messages on the way in and responses on the way out. You can do all sorts of fancy authentication mechanisms, things like that, right? So that is the most elaborate form of gateway, right? So gateway has a number of incarnations in Azure, and it's important for users to understand all of the options and use one that makes most sense for them. But the Azure Relay Service, from a cost perspective, I was looking it up. It costs I think $10 a month to run it.
Yeah.
You get 5,000 gigabytes, so it's quite cheap
a lot of
compared
data
to some of the
yeah.
other features. But that's you want to take that into account when you're designing your solutions as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like everything else, right? I mean, if you can get away with the sort of the simple, inexpensive one, do it, right? There's no reason to sort of go all the way up to App Gateway in terms of, to API management in terms of complexity, because now you got to configure it and manage it and at that point.
Yeah. And it comes with Azure Monitor support, so you can get metrics out of it. If you feel messages are getting lost and you can't figure out, there's a way to enable diagnostic logs, so you can get some more detailed logging to see what's going on. So it has all of the things that we can appreciate about most Azure services. In terms of support and reliability. Of course, that's all there.
We joke about this sometimes, but Azure's been around a long time. There's a lot of new services all the time, but some of the older ones they really have a niche, and they fill that niche really well, and they still exist, and people should still be using them. This sounds like a great example of that.
Yeah, this is one I forgot actually. It's called the Fluid Relay Service, which is one of our newest services, Azure Fluid Relay. And so again, not to confuse with Azure Relay, but Fluid Relay implements the Fluid framework in Azure, which is a framework that's used for data synchronization. Yeah, so if you have applications and many people using the same app, and you want to make sure data is kept in sync across all of the mobile devices, for example, you can connect through this Fluid Relay framework, which allows you to all of them rendezvous in the same point in the cloud, but then it has some backend logic which lets you move data bits around and keeps them in sync and whatnot. So that's a little more elaborate than just Azure Relay, because it's there's got some logic and compute in the back that Microsoft provides to help you keep your data in sync. So again, it just has the word relay in it, so it can be confusing at times. Just make sure we're talking the right relay service when you try to spin one up. It's Azure Relay or Azure Fluid Relay.
Yeah. Only so many words we can put together to string this together, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's kind of my little understanding and use of Azure Relay, and I hope our listeners can appreciate what it does and take advantage of it whenever they feel the need for it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, as we look at the comments and the feedback, I'd be curious to know if anybody out there's, an audience is still using it and what you're using it for, right? Again, is it something you've had forever, or is this, you're actively developing today against it? I suspect it's a mix of both, right? Like anything else. So, okay, awesome, cool, good. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk to Sujit. So, I've been on vacation, and so yeah, well, good to see you again.
Thank you. Same here.
Okay, get you later.